doctorate in. So we're very honored to have him here to lead these teachings. He's known for his humorous and and his down-to-earth teaching style that helps us relate these topics to our everyday lives. So we're thank you so much for offering these teachings.
Yes, thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Would you like to, Umza, or do you want me to?
I can. I haven't had the training.
Okay, so I'll do it today.
Okay. I can though.
If you like, okay.
I know the prayers.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's very hot today, which makes it an obstacle for many of us. So I appreciate you facing the obstacle of this kind of heat. And let's take a moment to set aside whatever we've had going on in our lives this morning, whatever running around we've been doing, whatever obstacles or worldly activities have been occupying our time and our attention. Let's put those to the side for the moment so we can focus on the teachings of the Buddha. We'll focus on our practice as we learn how to implement those teachings. And with that in mind, let's set a very strong motivation that the reason we are here together today is not simply to benefit our own lives alone. It's not simply to develop our own sense of peace and contentment, our own sense of relaxation, though those are short-term goals. But the real reason we're here is so we can improve our minds, so we can develop greater understanding of compassion, greater wisdom, so that we might develop the tools and techniques and the methods that allow us to be of more service to other sentient beings. That's the real goal, that we perfect our mind so that we might be able to be of greater service to others. When we let this motivation, the wish to be of benefit to others, serve as the primary and root motivation for all that we do, and as we sit down to study this text together, we should especially remind ourselves that that is why we have come together. And with that, Anshul will lead prayers.
So much. Visualize, we turn to page 34 of the prayer book. Oh yeah, the screen is shared. Visualize Shashan's Buddha, all enlightened being, the medic field of the issue. We say taking refuge and generating Bodhisattva 3 times in Tibetan and once in English.
Vedam soke shonam la hanchu badu dagni kyatsu chi dagi jin soke pe sonam gi yola pencher sange drupar sange vedam soke shonam la hanchu badu dagni kyatsu chi dagi jin soke pe sonam gi yola pencher sange drupar sho sange Shonam la chandu padu dagni kapsu chi dagi jinso gi pe sonam gi jola pencher sange drupar sho. Until I'm my supreme assembly, by my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings.
We'll recite 4 intentions once in English. All sentient beings
Have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies.
Now for the 7th
With my body, speech, and mind, I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I dedicate all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain unto the end of cyclic existence to turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. We can do in just in English if you want, or Tibetan in English. Up to you.
I think I know right.
Okay. Cool.
That's often the line to do medically that we visualize in front of us. This is offering of all things beautiful and pure and good, which lies all of these beautiful and pure things, and we offer to the Buddhas uh, in order to receive, to make our mind ready to receive the teachings. So we're going to offer this once in Tibetan and then we'll read the English.
The perfume strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I just as purely and I pray. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Gururanam Indala Punyayatayami. $73.
Can we turn to page 73 and offer praise to Shakyamuni Buddha? I'm going to read it a little bit slower then.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get a little closer from that.
Praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the furthest fire, the completely perfect, fully awake being, perfect knowledge and good conduct, Sugata and over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be named, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the fulfiller from the Shakya command. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, beyond the focus there, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata and over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the focus there, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you are born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, and then I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With supreme sides, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free, like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to justice I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the knowing that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime, pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path for liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha,
To all three, ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as any as all realms, atoms in all aspects. I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, a dream, or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. I'll offer the Heart Sutra as well.
Yes. Now we're going to offer the Heart Sutra, this on page 76. Is that shared? Oh. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Jam, the heart of the perfection of wisdom sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Jam.
Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on Massive Vulture's mountain in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara. How could any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the tranquility of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance upon the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, can be known as the truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Dayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva could train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, and even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So as we continue our exploration of this text, let's take a moment now at the beginning to remind ourselves of the three flaws of a faulty or broken vessel that we want to avoid, right? And to encourage ourselves to be appropriate students to receive the teachings. We want to avoid being like a vessel that is turned upside down. So when you have a pot that is upside down, no matter how much water you pour onto it, it'll always remain empty. In the same way, we want our minds to be open and receptive. We don't want to be closed-minded about any of the material that we're studying, even if it's something that we're not familiar with or accustomed to. And then in addition, we want to avoid being like a pot that has a crack or a hole in it. So no matter how much water you pour in, that is only going to drain out, right? It will still remain empty. And so in the same way, we want to avoid being forgetful or non-attentive. We want to encourage a mindfulness and an awareness and attentiveness to the material and to our practice and to our study. And then lastly, we want to avoid being like a pot that is stained or unclean, because no matter how much we pour into that pot, whatever we pour in, even if it's crystal clear, pure water, it'll be stained and polluted by what is already there. So in the same way, when we approach teachings, we want to go in without our own baggage, without our own prejudiced views, without pre-existing ideas of what these teachings mean. And therefore, in that way, we can get the most out of the teachings. So we want to have an open-mindedness, we want to have diligence, and we want an attentiveness, we want to be unprejudiced. And that third one is an important one to remember, because it doesn't just mean having negative views about something. You know, for instance, you might have studied a topic over and over and over again. Say you've studied the Four Truths, right? The basic philosophical tenets over and over and over again. So then you go to a teaching and you find out what's going to be on the Four Truths. You might say, well, I already know this teaching, right? That is still a type of prejudice. Even though what you may know is valid, it's not saying I don't believe in this teaching, but you're still coming in saying, well, there's nothing for me to learn here because I already know all this, right? So that isn't a useful way to go about a teaching or to go about attending to a teaching, because we always have the opportunity to learn something new. Even if the teacher isn't particularly skillful, there's still something that hopefully you can get out of any engagement with the Dharma, right? So we always want to embody these three attitudes or avoid these three faults. Now, with that said, I thought what I'd like to do today, it used to be the history at CKSL that we'd always have meditation mixed into our Sunday morning classes. But to be honest, a 2.5 hour class is a very long time in general. And if we have to have a break in the middle before meditation, it's really, I don't think it's the best use of time, especially for those of us that join online. So I've not been doing meditations on Sundays. And also I just talk a lot. And so I run out of time for meditation. So what I'd like to do today is at least start with very brief meditation, especially because it's so hot and there's so many things happening. There's so many distractions. Just before coming here, I don't know if anyone saw the news headlines, like there were gunshots at the president was at the correspondence dinner. There was a big dinner for all of the journalists in Washington, D.C. And the president was supposed to speak at it, and there were gunshots, and he had to be taken away in the beginning, in the middle of the teaching of this dinner. And say what you will about the various government leaders around the world, like violence is never an answer to anything, and all it does is cause chaos and disruption and cause fear. And so, it's a very turbulent state of affairs in the world right now. And so there's a lot going on, So let's just take a moment, and we won't do a detailed meditation, but what I thought we would start with is a meditation I really, really enjoy, which is called a 9-round breathing meditation. And it actually comes from Tantra, but I've been in audiences with this holiness that are non-Buddhist audiences where he led them in this meditation. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to lead anyone in this practice. If you do have experience with Tantra, then maybe you'll get a different experience out of it, but it's useful for all of us. And I like this practice because it's very forceful, right? You'll see as I explain it, for those who haven't done it before, you're doing more work. I don't know if that's the right word, but it feels like you're doing more active work than just following your breath. So especially for me personally, when I have a lot of distraction and I know my mind is in a really difficult place and I want to sit down and meditate, sometimes just sitting down and starting can be difficult. Like that in and of itself can be an obstacle, right? So this is a forceful way to kind of bring my mind out from whatever external obstacles I have into my meditative state or my attempt at a meditative state. So we're only going to do this, and then maybe a minute or two of mindfulness meditation afterward. But in your own practice, you can start with this and then do 10 minutes or however long of meditation. Use this as the entryway into your meditation practice, and it can be very helpful that way. Right. So the 9-round meditation is called that because we're going to do specific type of breathing, and each time we're going to do 3 of each, and that's why there are it's called 9 rounds. And so to do this type of breathing, we first have to visualize part of our subtle body. This is the part that comes from Tantra. So we first visualize what we call the central channel. So this is a channel that is made of light. It is like a straw, and it is made of white colored light. And it exists basically right in front of your spine. It's about the width of your pinky finger. And it runs up your whole body straight. And then at the top of your head, it curves. And you can visualize it ending right at the crown of your head. Right? That's fun. Actually, you can visualize it curving and ending right between your eyes. Depending on the visualization, there's different ones. But that's fun. So you visualize it like an umbrella handle almost, right? It curves and it terminates right here. And then on the bottom, you can visualize it terminating, it just coming to an end, about 1 hand width below your belly button. And then on the right side, so that is on the center of your body. It's called the central channel. On the right side, right next to it, is a slightly smaller channel, and that one is red in color on the right side. And it runs parallel to the central channel. Down at the bottom, it meets the central channel. They're joined together. And up at the top, it curves down and it goes to your right nostril. So the right channel ends on your right nostril. And then on the left side of the central channel, again, just slightly smaller, is, the central channel is blue in color. And this is white in color, the left channel. And again, it terminates with your central channel. And it goes up, and then it goes to your left nostril. Okay, so your central channel is blue in color. I apologize. The right channel is red, the left channel is white. The right and left channel end at your nostril, and the central channel and the left and right meet all joined together directly below, about 1 hand width below your belly button. So as you visualize that, what we're going to do is we're going to breathe first 3 breaths in through our left nostril, and we'll use our finger to block our right nostril as we breathe in. And as we breathe in, we visualize that we're breathing in white light. That is the pure, compassionate, loving energy of all the Buddhas. And it's purifying whatever negativities or whatever blocks, whatever obstacles we have in our central channel. It comes in through our left channel. It purifies everything that's in the way, all the obstacles. And then we'll move our finger over and we'll breathe out through our right nostril. And in that way, so the wind comes through our left channel, and then it goes out through our right channel. Okay, and we'll do that 3 times. And then we'll reverse. So we'll breathe in through our right nostril, visualizing again the brilliant white light coming in, and then purifying, getting rid of any obstacles, any blockages, any difficulties that are causing an inability for our inner wind to move correctly. And we breathe out through our left channel. And we'll do that 3 times. And then finally, we visualize breathing in through both channels, and then breathing out through both channels. And as we do this, every time, all of the obstacles that you can visualize, both in your central channel as well as in the 2 subsidiary channels, they get purified through this white light that comes in. So this is the visualization aspect of it. So we breathe in, we'll hold for a brief moment with the breath in, then we'll breathe out, then we'll hold on empty for a brief moment, and we'll repeat it. And I'll guide us through doing it this way. Okay? So we can use our finger to make it easier for us to breathe in only through one nostril and out through the other. So we're going to start by breathing in our left nostril. Okay? So breathe in, nice and slow. Hold. Now breathe out through the right. Hold. Breathe in through the left. Out to the right. In to the left. Out to the right. Now in through the right. Out to the left. In through the right. Out to the left. One more time. In on the right. Now we breathe in both. As you breathe out, visualize it exiting your central fin. Again, breathe in both. Exiting through your central fin. One last time, breathing in both. And exiting through your central fin. And now, for just a moment, allow your breath to fall into its natural rhythm, so you're no longer forcing it. And allow your awareness to rest on the rhythm of your breath. Whatever distractions arise, you recognize them as distractions. And instead of following them, instead of judging them, instead of allowing them to capture your awareness, you just put them aside. Recognize them, label them, and return your focus to the object of your meditation, which at this moment is your breath. Now, as you're ready, just allow your awareness to return to the room, or to the screen, I suppose, for those who are online. Thank you for doing that with me. You can see how, even if you don't have a strong sense of visualization, that practice of the 9-round breathing is still useful because, our instinct when we start a meditation practice is we want to control the breath, right? And we're always given the advice to let your breathing be natural, not to control it. We want to control it. That's our instinct. And so actually doing a practice where you are controlling it, very slow, deep inhales, holding, very slow, deep exhales, it just gives you more things to do, which sounds like a silly way to talk about meditation because there's always something to do in meditation, right? Like that's the whole purpose, is that we're not blanking out, we're not spacing out. There's always something to do. But for me personally, it's helpful to start with this very coarse level. Here's a thing to do. Here are instructions to follow. And that helps force my mind into a more contemplative state. So hopefully that's something you can find helpful. So as I was thinking about today's topic and the verses that we're going to cover, when I think of Dharma, and I mention this all the time, Dharma is transformation. That's the purpose of Dharma, right? We're to transform our minds, to transform how we exist in the world, to make our life more meaningful. That is the purpose of the Dharma, or the purpose of our studying the Dharma and practicing the Dharma, is transformation. We want a meaningful life. We want peace and contentment in this life. And Buddhism promises us the opportunity for that. However, Buddhism doesn't say that you can just pray and it'll just happen, right? You can't buy peace, contentment, and happiness. You can't pray for it. I mean, you can pray for it, but that alone is not enough, right? You can't expect it to be given to you just because you have teachers who care about you. Because the Dharma says that you can do all those things, and those are all useful. Properly relying on a teacher and engaging in prayer and engaging in offering to the Triple Gem. These are all powerful and important practices, but those alone aren't enough to transform your mind. Those are all part of the process of transforming the mind. We need to do the work of changing ourselves. That's what the Dharma teaches us. The Dharma is about transformation, but that transformation comes from within. It can never come from without. Any transformation that comes from the outside in is not going to be something you realize, that you evoke. It's going to be something happening to you, and it's not going to be long lasting, right? So we need to do the work of transformation. We need to do the work of changing. And that means changing our attitudes. It means changing our behavior. It means changing our mind. It means changing our habits, right? That's what the Dharma is doing, is teaching us how to transform our minds into the minds of beings who are living a more meaningful life. And when we think about changing our habits, that's what it really comes down to. Our habits of body, speech, and mind. We have to both get rid of our bad or harmful habits and adopt new beneficial habits at the same time, right? So we're always tasked to do both of these things at the same time. It isn't just one or the other. Both of them are helpful and both of them are necessary. And we'll find at some points in our life, we may focus on one more than the other, depending on what we're experiencing, and that's fine. But ultimately, if we want to achieve Buddhahood, we have to do both, where we are working to get rid of the negative habits of mind that we have accumulated and we have practiced over and over again since beginning of rebirth, and adopt new habits in their place. I mean, especially if you look even at this chapter, we're talking about morality, right? That we're talking about chapters 4 and 5 are teaching the practice of morality. And as we talked about morality, there are 3 different types of morality. The first one is the morality of restraint, which is avoiding engaging in negative actions. But the second morality is the morality of gathering virtuous dharma, or gathering virtuous objects. And the third type of morality is the morality of working for the benefit of others. And so when we think of morality in that way, it's not just ceasing to stop negative actions, but it's also actively pursuing virtuous actions, right? So that same dynamic is at play in everything we do. We need to, on one hand, work to stop whatever harmful activities we've been doing of body, speech, and mind, and actively adopt virtuous activity. And so depending on our life, one of these may be easier than the other, and one of them may be more important than the other. And that's a constant reevaluation of where our spiritual journey is taking us, right? But regardless, especially when we try to start, we need to reform these negative, harmful habits. because we see these negative, harmful habits as being the most insidious. Right? Beneficial habits, sometimes many of them will happen on their own as we get rid of the negative habits. As we get rid of habits that are based in the self-grasping mind and the self-cherishing mind, then the beneficial habits, many of them are going to become natural and they won't take as much effort because we've already gotten rid of the some of the causes that are preventing those natural states of being, right? But if we want to get rid of our negative minds, if we want to get rid of our bad habits, the first thing we have to do, well, the first thing we have to do is recognize them. We have to identify that these are harmful mental attitudes and harmful actions of body, speech, and mind. But then next, we need to identify their causes. That is really important. You know, I can't just say, I don't want to be angry anymore. Therefore, I'm not going to be angry, right? I can't just say that I don't want to follow the self-cherishing mind anymore. Even if I have conviction that anger and self-cherishing only cause harm to myself and others, I have conviction in that. Just saying, okay, then I'm not going to be angry anymore. It's not that easy, right? Maybe for some people it is. If it's that easy for you, then that's great. But for me, it's not that easy. For most of us, it's not that easy. We have to seek out the causes that are precipitating these harmful mental states. And when we investigate the cause, we also have to investigate the cause of the cause of the cause. Like its causes all the way down. We need to find the root of what's causing these disturbing emotions and these disturbing mental behaviors and these disturbing habits of body, speech, and mind. And when we do this investigation, we have two types of investigation. We have conventional investigation and worldly or conventional investigation on one side and an ultimate investigation on the other side. And they're both important. Now, ultimate investigation is always going to come down to the self-grasping mind, the mind that doesn't understand the nature of reality. That's going to be the root cause of all of our ultimate investigation, right? So that's useful and very important to know because we need to, as we continue to practice and as we deepen our practice, as we develop more and more understanding of what we mean by emptiness and of the lack of true existence, the lack of a truly existing self, a person or phenomenon, as our understanding of that increases, we need to bring that into all of our everyday activity more and more and more. So that ultimate investigation is critical and it's important. However, for most of us, that is almost secondary to the worldly investigation. Because if I, and this isn't even a Buddhist thing, if I know what are the triggers that are going to precipitate my experience of anger, then I can become aware of those triggers. And then I can do something about them in a meaningful way. Right. So everything I'm trying to do, especially at this part of my practice, this part of my journey on this path, is trying to prevent the negative emotions before they arise. Ultimately, I'm going to try to prevent the causes of those negative emotions that are in my own continuum, not the external causes. The external causes are inconsequential, right? Because I don't have control over the external causes. I have control over the internal causes. But first, I need to identify what causes any immediate moment for me to react in a certain way. So I'm always looking for causes, right? So for anger, it's very easy, well, not very easy, excuse me, but we can talk about it quite easily. So look at a moment of anger that you've had, and you can think over the last week, some moment when you became angry, and just see what caused that anger. So what was the immediate precipitating cause? And so say someone insulted me. Okay, so now that you have this, I was insulted by someone. So then you say, okay, well, why did that insult cause anger? Like, what is the relation between those two? And then you say, well, it's because I thought they disrespected me. Okay. Well, why does you being disrespected serve as a valid reason for you to become angry? And then you say, well, maybe their disrespect would prevent me from doing this thing that I want to do. Okay, well, why is doing that thing a necessary part of your life? You see what I mean? You can question every level. And you're always going to find that all you end up doing is making excuses. Right? And now some of them have a basis in validity because we live in the world. We have to get along with other people. We have to get along with our parents, our spouses, our family, our coworkers, our students, these things. So you have to find a balance of living in the world in such a way that you continue living in the world. But looking at your mind, you can do that without the mind of anger. You can react to external stimuli that are harmful in a way that isn't responding out of anger or attachment or any other negative mind. Right? So whenever you experience an emotion, you say, what is the cause of this? And then you look at that and you say, well, is that the real cause or is that just the excuse I tell myself? Right? I mean, here's a good example. I don't know about you, but I often, if I'm clumsy and I stub my toe, I get really angry. But who do I get angry at when I stub my toe? I can't get angry, at the rock or whatever that I tripped on because it's a rock, didn't do anything. And I can't get angry at my foot or my toe because it didn't do anything. So then I get angry at myself for being careless, maybe. Okay, but then how is that useful? So all of a sudden I'm experiencing valid physical pain, which is unpleasant. And then on top of that, I have this moment of anger, and I don't even have a valid object for anger. I'm just angry at myself for not paying attention, or I'm angry at this stupid rock. So I kick the rock, like that's going to do anything. So all I've done is taken this experience of pain and I multiplied it and made it worse by developing this mind of anger. So then you take a step back and you say, who am I angry at? And you say, well, I'm angry at myself for being careless. Okay, is anger going to prevent my carelessness, or maybe trying to be more conscientious of where I'm walking? Which of those is a more useful remedy to that situation, right? One of those is addressing my difficulty in a way that is allowing me a way to prevent this from happening in the future. And the other is not doing that at all. So anger isn't an appropriate response, right? But it's our first response. So you look at the anger and you say, what is causing this? And then you say, well, I don't want to be in physical pain. Of course you don't. But is that fear of physical pain reason to allow yourself to follow into a negative mind? And again, you can find very easily external reasons that sound convincing. But when you really analyze them, none of them are going to hold up. Okay? So when we want to change our habits, especially these negative habits that cause us to continue to cycle in samsara again and again, it's important to look at the causes that bring those habits in. Some of those causes will be very clear and easy to understand. And then others are going to take more time, right? Others are going to take more effort to identify because they're not going to be on the surface. They're going to be below the surface. And so this isn't just something you do during the day when you're experiencing these emotions. This is something you do during your meditation practice, when you can analyze what's happened to me today. Did I react in inappropriate ways? Did I get out of control? Did I follow my self-cherishing mind or my anger or my attachment? Or did I do a good job of not letting myself follow those minds, right? So every day when we engage in a meditation practice in the evening, that's an opportunity to really do this investigation. If you can do it during the day when those emotions arise, that's great. But for most of us, it's more difficult, right? And here's the thing. Unfortunately, Buddhist practice doesn't offer a quick fix to any of these things. Buddhist practice can offer an intellectual answer that's really easy to understand, right? And that you might develop conviction in. But applying that answer to your everyday life takes effort. Again, it goes to the very beginning, what I said about the idea of Dharma being transformation. You need to do the work of changing. You can't just hope for it to happen, right? And I will say the good thing about being so, starting the Dharma path is, especially in the beginning of our practice, a lot of time, small changes will have outsized effects because we've lived a life following the self-cherishing mind for so long. And we've lived a life following the self-grasping mind for so long that even trying to separate ourselves from that, some small amount can have a much outsized effect, right? But the more we practice, we may not experience those huge effects the same way. So we can't be discouraged. We have to recognize that it is a long-term practice, okay?
Page number.
We're not quite there quite yet. I'll let you know.
Analysis of a negative state of mind with respect to the ultimate nature of reality. So how would I always struggle with that because could you give an example of how that thing sort of be
For the ultimate analysis?
Yeah. So I get angry at something, but how does that relate to that non-existing in my head?
Yeah. So if we are going to do an ultimate analysis, right? When we think this actually might come up in these verses. Maybe I'm confusing it with Saturday's text. So first, we often say we try to develop recognition of the emptiness of the three spheres. So if I get angry at something, right? Let's say another person, and let's say they actually do something to harm me, right? First, the ultimate analysis says, who is the I that is getting angry? There's no truly existent I that gets angry, but as soon as I allow myself to follow the mind of anger, I automatically superimpose this idea of a truly existing I. That's what's getting angry. And then the object of my anger, this other person, I immediately ascribe to them true existence as well. And the actual act of anger, or the experience of anger, and the action, I ascribe true existence to that as well. So I said that not only is the I that is angry truly existent, but the object of my anger truly deserves my anger because they are truly existent, and my anger itself is valid and truly existent in that way, right? And we don't think that way. Like you don't think any of those thoughts when you're angry or any under emotion, but that's what you're doing. So then you say, wait, there is no truly existent I who can be angry. So who is this I that is experiencing anger, and how is it experiencing anger? Because anger itself doesn't truly exist. Anger itself is a superimposition of negative qualities on an object that then I grasp onto those qualities and react to them. And this object upon which I'm superimposing these qualities also doesn't truly exist in the way that I'm perceiving. Right? So the fact that they engage in this behavior doesn't mean that it has any reflection of their true nature, because they don't truly exist in that way. But in that moment of anger, we impute truly existing qualities on ourselves, on the object of our anger, and on the experience of anger itself. And then those are what allow us to experience anger. Right? And so by recognizing that, it can immediately cause the anger, if not to go away, to at least diminish, because you realize there's no actual valid basis. Never mind the fact that the anger itself is harmful. Never mind all those other aspects of it, but just there's no valid basis for it, because your anger is based on an imputation only, right? So that is the first level,
That's it.
right?
So the anger is arising because of like past habit.
It's arising, well, a couple different reasons, right? So ultimately, all of our afflictions arise out of ignorance, right? And the ignorance doesn't understand the nature of reality. So anger, especially, if we look at the three root poisons, we have ignorance, attachment, and anger. And anger, especially, is due to our experiences, we impute these negative qualities on an external object, right? This undesirability or this ugliness is what they often say. And then instead of actually observing the object, we observe these qualities we've imputed onto it, and then we grasp onto those, and that's what is the source of our anger, because we try to repel those undesirable qualities that we have imputed onto it. And attachment's the opposite. We impute desirable qualities and beauty and things that we want, and then we're attracted to those things that we have imputed. Now, that's not to say if someone causes me physical harm, yes, I'm not denying, or we're not gaslighting ourselves to say they didn't really hurt me. This knife sticking out of my gut doesn't really exist. We're not pretending those things don't exist, right? But what we're recognizing is that our experience is not in line with the actual nature of how things exist, right? So that's why we have to balance the conventional and the ultimate. So if someone stabs me, for me to be like, well, this knife isn't truly existent, and my body doesn't truly exist, and the enemy doesn't truly exist, that's not a helpful thing to do at that moment. It may be helpful for my mind, but as long as I have a chance of surviving, I have to do something about the wound, right? So we have to balance living in reality and having a mind that is pointed towards getting rid of self-grasping. So, honestly, in that moment, having a mind that recognizes the non-true existence of this wound and of this body and of these things, that is beneficial for your mind, right? Definitely. But we also say, well, I need to help my body as well. So we have to find a balance, right? So that is the primary way we talk about it. But then there are other ways as well, you can see. We're really trying to be confident in the non-true existence of our experience, right? And not letting ourselves grasp onto them. That also, though, comes down to, or it plays really well with ideas of self-cherishing as well, right? So they're not the same thing, right? We talk about self-grasping and self-cherishing aren't the same thing. But if I get angry at someone, I can look at the non-true existence of this I who is experiencing anger and the object of my anger and the anger itself. I can also say this is going more into what we're talking about here, the conventional exploration, is say, well, what is the purpose of me getting angry? Am I angry because they actually insulted me? Or am I angry because my ego is hurt, because I have a certain vision of myself and their insult or their ridicule or whatever it may be has burst that impression of myself. And therefore, I'm not allowed to follow my own kind of fantasies about how I exist in the world. Regardless of if their insult was valid or not, it could have been something made up. But so what are they really harming? They're not harming my mind. They're not harming my body. They're harming my ego, right? They're harming my self-cherishing mind. And my self-cherishing mind is reactive. So that could be coupled with understanding the lack of true existence when you want to do that analysis. That requires more effort, right? So that's why I think for me personally, and for most students, starting with recognizing the conventional is useful. But when you have a taste of understanding emptiness a little bit, then bringing that in is useful, right? So then you just have to see on your own practice. It's good to do both. Yeah, and one may be more useful in an immediate moment than others. The truth is we talk about we say self-grasping is the root of samsara, right? The self-grasping mind, the mind that grasps the true existence of persons and phenomena, is the root cause of us continuing to cycle in samsara. That is what we need to uproot. That's what we develop understanding of emptiness, and emptiness gets rid of that, and by eliminating that, all the other afflictions are eliminated, right? So that is the root. And yet, in our everyday life, the self-cherishing mind is equally important. So we identify the self-cherishing mind as the cause of all of our suffering. Now, if you want to go to the debate courtyard, right, you'd say the self-cherishing mind can't be the cause of all of our suffering because it itself has a cause, which is self-grasping, right? So if you want to get very analytical and technical, then that's true. But in our everyday practice, recognizing how incredibly powerful the self-cherishing mind is useful. And that's why we use that kind of language to say the self-cherishing mind is the cause of all of our suffering. And then the self-grasping mind is what motivates the self-cherishing mind and causes it to continue over and over, right? And so then in our everyday practice, we need to combat against both of those, and one may be easier than the other, depending on the circumstances, depending on our practice. So we have to see which is more useful for us. But ultimately, we have to work on both, right? But so because of this, because we need to be constantly analyzing what is happening in our mind, where are these reactive emotions coming from? How are these causing me harm? How is it, do I have conviction that when someone says anger doesn't do anything but harm me and others, do I really believe that? Or do I just say it because the teachings say it, right? We have to develop conviction, and then through that conviction, analyze their causes. So that's why I always say we need to adopt these three practices of continually study or hearing, contemplation, and meditation. Choe Khor Sum. We constantly have to be doing these things. So study or hearing is the first process where we're engaging in material, trying to learn new material, both about ourselves and about the world around us. That's the Dharma's teachings. The Dharma is teaching us not just about the world, but about ourselves. So we study. And then through that study, we develop a sense of understanding. And we have to then make that sense of understanding firm. And so we get rid of all of our doubts, and that's through contemplation. So once we learn new material, whether it be about our own minds or about the world around us, then we have to ask ourselves, do I really believe this? Do I have an intellectual understanding of this that is valid and is based in reality, right? Do I have any doubts about it? So we go through the act of trying to recognize all of our doubts and get rid of them, right? We recognize a doubt, and then we figure out the answer to that doubt. So that's the act of contemplation. We develop conviction in whatever we have studied. And then once we have some type of conviction, we try to make that realization inseparable from our mind through the act of meditation, right? We try to make it, whether it be, if it's an emotional state like compassion or love and kindness, then we try to make that inseparable from our mind so that we are familiar with it in such a way that it's never distinct from us. If it is an analytical understanding, like a recognition of the nature of reality, then, or a recognition of the harm of the self-cherishing mind, then we become familiar with that through meditation in such a way that we can identify it more and more readily throughout our everyday life. And then through that cycle, we have more to learn, right? So the study, contemplation, and meditation isn't a one-way trip. It's a continual cycle of improving our minds and of transformation, right? So those are critical all the time. We should never think that I have the answers, that I figured it out, right? And at the same time, and this comes up in these verses, we should celebrate when we do have realization and understanding. We say, okay, I figured something out. Like I'm much further than I was a year ago or even yesterday. That's fine. We should celebrate all the advances we make, right? We shouldn't be perpetually beating ourselves up, saying, I'm not good enough, I'm a samsaric being, everything is worthless, because that's not useful, right? But we have to find that balance of having non-egotistical pride in our accomplishments, in celebrating our accomplishments, and then always realizing there's more work to do and trying to find that balance. The truth is, we know it sounds very simplistic to say, but we can't control the world. We control how we react to it, right? And so since we can control only our reaction to the difficulties of the world, then we need to identify what are the internal causes that are precipitating our reactions. The external causes are easy to understand. I say that, but we should so also put an effort to understanding. Because it may be the fact that one person insults me and it doesn't bother me, and someone else says the exact same insult and it does bother me. So clearly there's an external cause that is different between those two individuals and the way I relate to them. So I should be aware of that. That's a very conventional non-Buddhist understanding that is useful for me to know. Because by understanding that, I'm learning something about my mind. Why is it, when this person says this in this circumstance, I don't have any reaction, but when this other person says the exact same thing, something happens to me. What is it, Because it's clearly not the words. It's clearly not the sentiment. There's something about my reaction to those individuals. So learning that isn't a Dharma thing, right? That's just like trying to understand how they exist in the world. But learning that is critical. Because if I want to be able to analyze my mind and I want to get rid of these perpetually harmful behaviors that I've adopted since the beginning of this time, I need to see all of their conventional trigger points as well. The one thing that we need to avoid, not the one thing, one of the big things we need to avoid, I don't know if there's a better name for it. I call it the yeah, but reaction. And so if I say, what I mean by that is, if you try to identify the cause of something, let's say, this is the example that we're sticking with this morning. Someone insults me and in a professional setting. And I say, okay, yes, it's true that all that's happening is that they're upsetting or they are attacking my self-expression mind. Yeah, but it's important for me to have a good reputation. Yeah, but it's not useful for me to be in this environment when I'm being constantly belittled. Yeah, but, and we make excuses, right? The yeah, but reaction is our gut reaction. And we have to really work hard to avoid it, okay? And yes, as I said, there are certain times, especially for those of you who don't have the luxury of living in a monastery like me and being ordained, you have to deal with the real world in a way that I don't have to do. So you may have to some extent, engage in activities to defend your reputation or whatever in a work environment, for instance, because it's critical to keep your job and so on, right? But it should not be your gut reaction. When you engage in those kind of behaviors to defend yourself against critique and so forth, it shouldn't be instinctual. It should be you analyzing, you recognizing that any reaction you do is not going to come from a place of a reactionary emotion. It's not going to come from your anger or self-cherishing, but through analysis of the situation and the environment, you recognize that in order for me to continue living a spiritual life, in order for me to continue trying to be a benefit to others, it's important that I keep this job. And in order to keep this job, I need to do such and such activities, right? So it's not an instinctual gut reaction, but it is an analyzed, thoughtful reaction, okay? But the yeah, but reaction is what you have to avoid. And that's our instinct because we want to make excuses for ourselves because it's so much easier to put the blame outside of ourselves for everything. So much easier. We've done it over and over and over all the time. And that's what that yeah, but reaction, that excuse reaction is to put the blame as anything but me. And it might feel good to do it, but it's not going to help us move forward on our spiritual path. It's not going to create any long-lasting benefit to our minds. All it's going to do is cause us to avoid looking at the real causes of our discontent. Okay. So if we want to grow in any sort of spiritual sense or a worldly sense, we have to avoid making those excuses. We have to avoid the yeah, but reaction. Because what it does is it undercuts our own chance for spiritual growth and for happiness. That's what making those excuses does. Looking at the ways that we cause our own suffering can be painful, right? But if we want to grow into a life that is filled with contentment and peace and happiness, regardless of the external difficulties, we need to confront the fact that we're the ones causing that internal difficulty. We're the ones precipitating our own suffering. The causes are merely conditions that we're reacting to. And so even though that is painful to look at, if we don't look at it, we don't address it, we're never going to be free from it, right? And so we don't do it all at once, right? We don't just jump into the deep end. We use our intellect to then approach it in an analytical way that allows us some experiential understanding, slowly, slowly, slowly. If we don't want to have I always try to avoid giving these kind of fantastical impressions of the Dharma, or these very romantic impressions of the Dharma. I think, or I know, I believe, that the Dharma has the infinite capacity, or our study of the Dharma, and the way it is taught by our teachers, has the infinite capacity to make us all Buddhists, to eliminate all of our suffering, if we're able to follow it, right? But you can get into this very romantic notions the way you describe things. And the truth is, those romantic notions deny the fact that it's a lot of work, that it isn't easy, right? So just reading some of these teachings teach us what we aspire to be, but that's not who we're going to be tomorrow. So we always have to keep these teachings as our goals, right? Especially a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. We can't live like Bodhisattvas 100% of the time because we're not Bodhisattvas yet. But we can take the life of a Bodhisattva and make it as congruent with our everyday life as possible as we work to eliminate our self-cherishing mind and as we work to increase our bodhicitta and our awareness of emptiness, right? So we're bringing ourselves closer to that goal all the time. But to look at the way a Bodhisattva would deal with something, we can't do that all the time. So we have this romantic notion. Those romantic notions are often based in fantasy, and they're not based in reality. So if nothing else, Dharma is based in reality. That's the whole purpose of it, right? When we say like we don't understand the nature of reality, we don't understand emptiness, we don't understand self-grasping and how it is causing our suffering. That is what reality really is. You know, many of the times we translate even the word for emptiness. So the word emptiness is the word emptiness. Many of the other translations that mean the same thing, we translate them as reality or thusness, right? When we say thusness, when we say reality, it means the fact that things don't exist the way they appear, the lack of true existence. So the word term emptiness means they're empty of true existence, right? That's what we use the word emptiness to mean. But we also say the reality of phenomena is the emptiness of that phenomenon. So we're trying to understand reality, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so even though it may sound romantic and fantastical, we need to base it in reality itself, because that's what we're going to do. If we're going to make any progress on our minds, it's not based in fantasy world, it's based in reality, right? I just think that it's easy to get caught up in the idea of something, in the idealized idea of something, and then that isn't useful for your everyday life sometimes. If I think of examples as we go, I'll let you know. But I think the important thing is always try to ground ourselves in the recognition that I'm an imperfect being who's doing my best to find happiness, contentment, and joy in this life. And I recognize that the best way to find happiness and peace in this life is to dedicate myself to the service of others. I recognize the largest obstacle I have to that in the immediate sense is the mind that grasps at my own happiness as if it was the most important thing in the world and prioritizes my own needs over the needs of others. I recognize that that is what is causing my immediate sense of discontent because I'm never going to be satisfied as long as I'm always trying to serve only myself. And then through realizing that, I have the understanding that that itself comes from my misunderstanding of the nature of reality. And that when I can recognize that reality doesn't exist the way I perceive it to, then it makes it easier to get rid of the self-cherishing. So having that as the core foundation is what it means to be connected to reality, right? It's easy to get into these idealized versions of practice when we look at our teachers and we look at examples from the history, both in Tibet and in India. We see these like amazing, fantastical beings who have been practicing for lifetimes, who have an ability to do things that we can't do. So we have to aspire to their realizations without beating ourselves up for not achieving them immediately. So for example, we talk about a bodhisattva. We should be so committed to others that we'd be willing to give up our life, even for the benefit of a single sentient man. And we have examples of bodhisattvas doing that all the time. Of the Buddha in his past lives, I mean, there's the whole story of the tigress, right? And the Buddha in his past life, when he gave up his life to feed a hungry tigress, right? And he didn't just give up his life. He like slit his own throat because she was too weak to do it herself, right? That's great. But we should aspire to have that kind of compassion. But we don't, right?
Gave up his materialistic life, his wife, his kingdom. That was
Well,
the benefit of others.
That's another example. Is we can say that most of us, I mean, to be fair, those of us who are ordained did give up our worldly lives. But for most people, you aren't able to give up your worldly life to pursue study the Dharma. So you have to find a balance that is meaningful, right? But so we have to recognize that we live in reality and we have to take what our understanding and experiences of a reality and take the Dharma and see how the Dharma isn't talking about some fantastical thing. That's the other thing. And this goes with the yeah, but reaction is that we can say, yeah, but the teachings describe something that I'm never going to be able to do. So therefore, it's not worth me putting effort into it because the teachings are talking about something that's so far out of my capacity. So that's just another excuse. Instead, we have to say, that's not something I can do right now. Maybe, but I can work in that direction and I can do some small version of that thing now. I may not be able to give up my life to help a single sentient being, but I can definitely give up my seat on the metro. Those are widely different things, but they're both pointing in the same direction, right? I'm willing to take on some physical discomfort in order to relieve someone else's physical discomfort. So those are all on the same trajectory. But if our first instinct is to say, yeah, but that's some fantastical story, that's not going to help our everyday life, right? So we have to bridge that gap.
Venerable, you're talking about the same trajectory. So going down the line, there is this enthusiasm which arises that you have found something so precious and it has helped you, even though you have not
Sorry.
perfected. Even though you have not perfected your conceptualization of emptiness, if it helps you, there's this growing enthusiasm to share it with somebody who doesn't even know about it. How does one curtail that? It's so difficult.
Yeah, I will say that's something that we have to learn how to do the more we study any spiritual path and we feel like it's causing, or never mind, spiritual path, the more we study anything and we feel that it's benefiting our lives, our first instinct often is to share that with others, right? So we have to be very careful to make sure we do so in a meaningful and in a non-oppressive kind of way, because people aren't interested in Buddhism, or they aren't interested in Pilates, or they aren't interested in this new diet fad, whatever it is you've been doing that's improved your life so much, then you telling them about it isn't going to improve their life. It's just going to frustrate them, right? And now, obviously, I don't believe these worldly things, such as a new diet routine or a new exercise routine, are going to be all that beneficial in the big picture. They're beneficial maybe to the immediate sense. Obviously, that's not the same league as the Dharma. I think the Dharma can benefit everyone. But you have to be careful about sharing it enthusiastically with others, because you need to share it in a way that they're receptive, that it works for their minds, right? So if someone seeks out your advice because of your practice of Dharma, then that's one thing. But if they're not seeking out your advice, you can obviously still give advice to your friends and your family. You have to do so in such a way that's appropriate for them. So that may mean not using Buddhist language, or may mean making accommodations where you say, like, if I was in their circumstance, I would do X, Y, and Z. But I know that they're not going to, but they might be able to do X. So therefore, I'm going to only go that far, right? So we have to, our enthusiasm is helpful. Enthusiasm is great. Enthusiasm is what keeps us practicing, right? So don't ever think that enthusiasm itself is a bad thing. And diligence, joyful effort is a type of enthusiasm, right? It's like looking at virtuous activity and finding joy in that virtuous activity. And that joy sustains us when the activity is difficult. So enthusiasm is great. We have to combine it with wisdom, conventional wisdom, right? So that's why we always need to balance the method and the wisdom. So our enthusiasm is only helpful if we're using it in a meaningful way. And if our enthusiasm causes us to go act, there are stories, especially, maybe it's less now, but when Westerners first started meeting Tibetan monks in the Dharma in the late 60s and the early 70s, a lot of Westerners would come to India, where at that point, which is where they're meeting these Tibetan monks, or to Nepal, and they would give up everything, right? They would like sell all their possessions to like follow them. And then in 2 or 3 months, they'd be like really exasperated, and they'd be tired, and they'd like very regretful, because their enthusiasm was so strong that they didn't think about where they were in their lives, Same thing with a lot of people who want to ordain. I know a lot of Westerners who have this motivation to ordain right away. They meet the Dharma, and like 2 months later, they say, I want to become a monk or nun. And you say, maybe take a little time, Like, it's so exciting in the beginning, but maybe, take a little time and think about it. And if it's the right thing for you, it'll be right in a year as it is now, right? So you have to take your wisdom to temper your enthusiasm, not to remove it. Enthusiasm is so important, but to then allow your enthusiasm to be realized in a meaningful way, to encourage appropriate and helpful behavior, right? Not unsustainable behavior.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you.
Sustaining is really important. The getting out of samsara is not a sprint. It is definitely a marathon. It's an ultra marathon. Okay. So we need to create habits that are sustainable. And those habits are going to change as our practice develops. And as we get better at meditating, and as we get a better understanding of our mind, then of course our habits will have to change. But the whole point of the Dharma is how we can take the Dharma, which was taught as we understand it 2,500 years ago, yet it is still perfectly applicable to our lives now. So the Dharma itself isn't changing, but the way we create sustainable habits out of our understanding of the Dharma is going to change. So that's what's important. Create sustainable habits that we can do all the time, not only when it's convenient, right? So with that, well, that's a lot of me blabbing, but these verses, this section we're on today, we will jump to. They're very straightforward, I think, but I say that every week, so we'll see. So we are, just a reminder, we're on page 43 of this version of the text, which is chapter 5, verse 59. So again, if we think of Shantideva's text can be divided a few different ways. The first way is we understand the first 3 chapters are teaching us how to develop bodhicitta, the wish to become Buddhist to benefit all sentient beings. The next 3 chapters are how to protect that bodhicitta from degenerating. And then the final 3 chapters are how to then increase that bodhicitta. Again, with the 10th chapter being dedication. So that's one way to break it down. Develop bodhicitta, protect that bodhicitta from degenerating, and then increase it. Another way of understanding it is that the teaching, these chapters are teaching us the 6 perfected activities of Bodhisattva, the 6 paramitas. And the first one, the perfection of generosity, is taught in chapters 2 and 3 combined, especially in the teaching of the 7-limb prayer, which happens in chapter 2, or at the end of chapter 2 into chapter 3. And then the perfection of morality is taught in chapters 4 and 5. So we're in the second half of that right now. And then after that, the other perfections each get their own chapter. So chapter 6 is on patience, 7 is on diligence or dreadful effort, 8 is on concentration, and 9 is on wisdom. So that's the other way to look at the division of what is being taught in this text. So with both of those in mind now, we say that we are in the final section, or we are in the middle section of how to protect our bodhicitta from declining, and we're doing that through understanding the practice of morality. And this specific chapter is about how to use awareness to protect our mind, or alertness, I think is translated in our version, right? So our previous chapter was on conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is being aware of everything happening around us and what is motivating our engagement in that. And alertness, or the English terms, I trip over them all the time and conflate them. Alertness or awareness, introspection, we can say, is a mental factor that is constantly looking at our own mind. It is not looking for external obstacles. It's not looking for external situations. It's not looking for external distractions. It's constantly analyzing our own mind and saying, what is precipitating my behavior? What is the actual motivating factors? What am I reacting to? So introspection is constantly looking at yourself alone and making sure that your motivation for whatever activity you're doing is what it should be, right? So we always want our introspection to be aligned with virtue. So introspection, or alertness, goes hand in hand with mindfulness. Mindfulness being constantly remembering the object of our meditation or the object of our awareness. So in this case, since we're not in active meditation, we're talking about everyday life, the object should be virtuous activity, right? So we should always try to have our mind focused on virtue, and it would be mindfulness that is keeping our mind connected to that virtue. And then the introspection is actually checking to see, are we actually pursuing virtue or not? So those two work together in that way. So our introspection, or alertness or awareness, depending on the translation, Sheishin in Tibetan, is the mental factor that's constantly analyzing our own mind. And it goes hand in hand with mindfulness. So if we think of mindfulness first, what mindfulness is doing, mindfulness, smrti, or drenpa, is remembering the object of whatever it is we're focused on. So in meditation, obviously, that's a specific object of our meditation. But in our everyday life, what is our mindfulness focused on? Are we actually properly remembering the object that we want to be pursuing? So outside of meditation, the object that we should have mindfulness toward is virtue, virtuous behavior, virtuous activity in general, right? And the introspection is that part of our mind that is looking to see, are you remembering to pursue virtue? Is your mindfulness focused on virtue, or have you forgotten virtue and you're pursuing the self-cherishing mind, or you're pursuing mindlessness, or you're not even conscientious of what it is that is empowering or motivating your actions, right? So the introspection is checking up on our own motivation. It's looking at ourselves. And the mindfulness is what we should be focused on. The analogy that's given in the beginning of this chapter. So the reason this chapter is called guarding our alertness, right, is we say that a wild drunk elephant or any external enemy might be able to harm our body, but that's all that it can do, which may sound very devastating to us, but ultimately isn't that big of a deal in the big picture. Whereas if our mind is untamed, the wild drunk elephant of our mind that is not tamed by mindfulness and introspection can cause so much more damage, right? Because it can cause damage not only in this life and not only to ourselves, but to other sentient beings, and it can create negative karma that will ripen in many, many future lives. So we need to use introspection and awareness, introspection and mindfulness to tame our own elephant minds and therefore protect ourselves from the real enemy, which is the untamed mind. And the analogy they give is that if our mind is like a wild elephant, then whatever it is that we're trying to focus on, the object of our meditation is like the pole that's set in the ground in the center of the training ground. And our mindfulness is the rope that is wrapped around the elephant's neck that is tied to that pole, that is keeping the elephant within a certain circumference. And then the curved hook that an elephant trainer uses is the introspection that is making sure it's always moving in the right direction. That's always constantly keeping it in check. So in that way, you see how the mindfulness and the introspection work together. Now, when we're engaging meditation practice, right, these are the two main antidotes, two obstacles to achieving calm abiding meditation. When we try to achieve calm abiding meditation, or single-pointed concentration, our two main obstacles, we've talked about this before, so I won't do too much more today, but our two main obstacles are laxity and excitement, right? There are other obstacles that precede that, such as laziness and so forth. But the two main obstacles, once we start practicing, are either laxity, sometimes called lethargy, sometimes called sinking, whereas exactly what it sounds like, our mind gets heavy, and whatever it is we're trying to meditate on gets fuzzy and far away, and we're not able to maintain it because we get a sense of sleepiness, not just physical sleepiness, but like a mental sleepiness, right? Or excitement, which is the exact opposite. Our mind's constantly hopping around, not able to stay focused, distracted at every little thing that comes along. Those are the two main obstacles. And the main way to remedy them is to have this introspection that is constantly looking at them to see what's going on, right? Because the problem is, if you don't realize you are engaging in lethargy, then you're not going to do anything to prevent it. If you don't realize that your mind is hopping around and constantly agitated or excited, then you're not going to do anything to prevent it, right? So the main antidote we need is that, right? And then when you're engaging in meditation practice, then you change your visualization to counterbalance. If you notice that you are sinking, that you're experiencing lethargy, then there are techniques to try to focus yourself more tightly. They literally use the same language in Tibetan of like tightening your mind and sharpening your focus to pull yourself out of lethargy. And when you notice that you are very excited or agitated, those are both the same term in Tibetan, then you have to relax your meditation a little bit and try to create more distance for yourself, right? So sometimes increasing the size of what it is you're meditating on can make it, ideally we should be able to meditate. If we're visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha, we should be able to visualize him the size of a chickpea, of a chana that is on the tip of our nose. So in such fine detail, we can see the whites of his eyes and every wrinkle in his robe, even though he's that small. But if you find yourself overly distracted, then you let the visualization become bigger and bigger and bigger, and that gives you more relaxation into it. Anyway, that's a different discussion. So the purpose, though, is recognizing the role of introspection. And so right now, introspection, we understand it as being a necessary technique to help tame our wild mind, and that is how we are preventing ourselves from avoiding morality, right? Because it's all teaching morality. So the section we just completed was talking about the first type of morality, how the morality of restraint, of avoiding non-virtuous activity, right? And I won't go over that again, except to say that if we look at verse 58, in some way summarizes a lot of that, which is to say, by thinking again and again that after a long time I have won this great leisure, likewise I should hold my mind as utterly unshakable as the King of Mountains. So this is just reminding ourselves of how long it has been and how much effort it has taken for us to achieve the circumstances that we have now. of not only a human rebirth, but a human rebirth that has the proclivity to practice Dharma and the opportunity and access to practice Dharma. And therefore, we use that reflection on that to help us make our mind solid, to help make our mind unwavering, and to help make our mind unreactionary to external distress, right? So we talked about that last week, so I won't go over it again. But that is the concluding of how to train in the morality of restraint. So this next section that we're starting now is how to train in the morality of gathering virtue. And this has two sections within it. And this is part of the reason I was talking this morning about having to identify causes. Because this first section, the subsection, starting with verse 59 is, in order to train in the morality of gathering virtue, we have to train in abandoning our attachment to the cause that prevents us from training in morality. Okay, let's try. I'll say that again because it's a lot of confusing words. It's identifying here that our attachment to our body and our attachment to this life is one of the primary causes that prevents us from training in morality. And so what these next verses are going to do is they teach us what we need to do to abandon that attachment, because that attachment, especially to this body and this life, is causing an obstacle for us to train in morality, especially the morality of gathering virtuous activities, right? So these next verses are all about why are we so attached to this body and how is that serving as an obstacle to our practice of morality, okay? The other half of this chapter, of this section, is how to then be skilled in accomplishing virtue. And that starts on verse 71. So between verse 59 and verse 70 is how to abandon the attachment to the cause for not training in morality, and then how to actually become skilled in accomplishing virtue. And those are the two sections of how to train in gathering the morality of gathering virtue. So verse 59 says, and now what I like about these verses, this section, is it's addressing the mind itself, which is a really cute way. Like it's a narrative technique that Shantideva uses sometimes, where he is, instead of being abstract, he's talking to the mind itself, which I think is it makes it feel very personal, right? Like when you read this text. So I think it's a really wonderful narrative technique for him to employ as a teacher. If mind, you are not made unhappy when this body is dragged and tossed about by vultures greedy for flesh, then why are you so concerned about it now? So this is pointing out that after we've passed away from this life, we won't care that our body is being dragged around by vultures or being eaten or being burned or being buried or whatever it is that happens to our body, right? Because we'll have passed away. So our attachment to this body is only temporary, right? So if we have no attachment to this body once we've passed away from this life, why do we have such extreme attachment to this body now? Right? That's what he's saying. That's what he's opening. And I know your response is going to be, yeah, but. Don't worry, we'll get there. There's a yeah, but response, right? And he acknowledges that. That comes later. So that's the first thing we start with. Why are we so attached to this body? We know that when we've passed away, we don't have any attachment to it. Some people do, to be fair. And it's very misplaced, right? They're like, I don't want such and such to happen to my body after I've passed away. Why? When you've passed away, your body is nothing but flesh and meat and bones. It's useless to you. It's not serving you in any meaningful way. Most of us are able to at least understand that intellectually if we don't have a strong emotional reaction. And therefore, I don't care what happens to my body when I pass away. I don't care if it's the food for vultures or for worms or whatever it is. So why do I care about it now? Right? That's an important thing to ask ourselves. We might think we have an answer, but our answer is only the very surface level. Because our answer is going to be, and that's going to come up again and again throughout these verses. The answer is going to be, well, I need my body because my body is what lets me engage in virtue. Okay, true. Do you really mean that though? Like, think about it. When I say, oh, the reason I'm attached to this body is because that's how I engage in virtue. Is that it? Or is that like the third, fourth, fifth level reason? The first reason is because I like my body. The first reason is because I like existing in the world, because I'm attached to pleasure. And my body is one of the main sources of me experiencing physical pleasure, right? Is that the real, so yes, my body is what allows me to practice virtue in this life, in this moment. That's 100% true. And the fact that my body is functioning in a way that I still have the movement of all my limbs and all my senses intact, that's important. And so I can say that and recognize that there's a truth to that. But is that really my primary reason for being attached to this body? And if it is my primary reason, then okay, great. Then I'm good to go. It's probably not. It's probably down on the list, right? And I think that's what I mean. We need to avoid that yeah, but reaction because that's making an excuse. Okay. So we have to really say, is my attachment to this body simply because I want to practice virtue and in this life my body allows me to do that? Or are there other reasons that I'm attached to it? That I'm attached to the way it looks. I'm attached to the way it exists in the world. I'm attached to the things that the pleasure it gives me. So we'll keep going with these verses and see where we get what. So now we're on verse 60. But this section goes from verse 59 to verse 70.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So now we're on verse 60. Holding this body as mine, why, mind, do you guard it so? Since you and it are separate, what use can it be to you? Right? So we understand the most important thing is our mind. Our mind is far more important than our body. Anything our body does is only a consequence of our mind first, right? It's our mind that is transformed. It is our mind that allows us to achieve Buddhism. It's not our body. And so, again, addressing the mind directly, you claim this body as mine. Yet, why? Because the mind and the body, we know that they're separate. The analogy we often use is of a horse and its rider. So yes, the body is important, right? In the same way that the horse is important, but the horse and the rider are not the same thing. The rider is utilizing the horse to achieve an end, but it's not the same thing as the horse, right? So our body is not the mind. The body is merely an expedient means for us to engage in Dharma practice in this life, in this moment. So if we conflate the body and mind, and we say that this body, to some extent, is a real existing me, we're never going to be free from samsara. So this verse is just very lightly touching on emptiness. You say this body is mine, quote unquote. Why do you guard it so? Why do you believe this to be mine? I remember once, before I became a monk, so this must have been 2010, 2009 maybe, I was at a teaching around then. I was at a teaching in New York City with this Wellness Dharma, and it was a public talk. So it wasn't a Dharma teaching specifically. He always gives these talks on secular ethics. That's normally what he would talk about when he gives these big public teachings in the US at least. And he was sitting on like a nice, not a throne, not a teaching throne, but like a nice recliner, not a recliner, like a nice big plump easy chair. And he's sitting in the middle of the stage and it's just about to start, right? Everyone's like still getting ready. And you see him look for his mala and he didn't have it on his wrist. And so he goes, hey. And his mic was on so we could hear him. But he wasn't talking about it. He goes, and he says in Tibetan, bring me my mala. And so then someone runs out and then he looks up and he goes, oh, did you hear me? I said, bring me my mala. That's so great. That's so ridiculous. And he just starts laughing. My mala. He was so amused that he's like, my mala. This idea of it belonging to me and some, this me and mine, right? And the audience is like, what? What is funny about that? We don't get it because it wasn't a Buddhist audience. But for him, the fact that his first instinct was bring me my mala, right? Is grasping at me and mine. When we say the grasping at self of persons, it's not just grasping at the me, but also grasping at the mine, right? Me and my both. It's very amusing. But he just starts laughing, and everyone's like, what? We don't get it. We don't get the humor because we don't understand the nature of reality. But for him, the fact that his instinct, my mala, he was very amused by that. Why do we grasp at this body as if it were me? We know intellectually the body and the mind are separate. We know that. Yet if I hurt my hand, I say I've been hurt. Not the flesh of my hand has been hurt, but I have been hurt. Right? And so in conventional terms, we need to be able to recognize if I go to the hospital, it's more useful to say, hey, I've hurt my hand. Than it is to be like this flesh that is the body that is in a relationship with my mind is something that has experienced pain. Like, okay, whatever, that's fine. We're going to talk to a doctor, we give them the information they need. That's fine. Balance, conventional and ultimate understanding of reality. But in my mind, my body, my flesh, whatever it is merely, the horse that my mind is riding. And so I can't conflate the two. And yet I do all the time. And I get so attached to this body. So attached. So he continues, why confuse mind? Do you not hold on to a clean wooden form instead? What is the point of guarding this putrid, dirt-filled machine? So he says, if you're so obsessed with this body, it's definitely going to break down. It's dirty, it's gross, it's filled with all these disgusting things, and it's going to break apart. why don't you get obsessed with some nice, beautiful wooden statue? You can carve a beautiful wooden statue and you can make it beautiful. And that has just as much validity as being the me as this body does. Right? And that you can control because you can sand it, you can polish it, you can make it so beautiful. Whereas this body you're stuck with is filled with nothing but foul substances. So to be attached to this body as if it were me and mine is no better than being attached to some external statue made of wood and saying it's me or mine. So why are you choosing one over the other? And again, this is really digging into this idea of I don't truly exist the way I perceive myself to exist. And I constantly conflate my aggregates, especially the form aggregate, with my sense of self that is imputed upon or in dependence upon those aggregates, right? So that's what this is pointing at. That is going to be much more detailed when we get to the chapter on wisdom, which is the final chapter, right? Chapter 9. So the whole chapter on emptiness. But so here, he's just reminding us that even in our practice of morality, this understanding of emptiness and the lack of grasping at the self as if it truly existed, and the lack of conflating the body and the mind as if they were the same thing, is a useful way to help generate conscientiousness and engage in the practice of morality. Now, these next two verses are a little bit First of all, mentally separate the layers of skin from the flesh. Then with the scalpel of discrimination, separate the flesh from the skeletal frame. And having split open even the bones, look right down into the marrow. While examining this, ask yourself, where is its essence? So this is teaching us, again, this section is how do we get rid of our attachment to the body? Because being attached to this body and this life is serving as an obstacle for us engaging in virtue, right? So it's teaching us one of the techniques is to realize not only is our body not our mind, not only is our body separate from our mind, but our body itself, what purpose does it serve us other than being a source of, in its very essence? We can break it into pieces, and there is no me or mine that exists in the body. So we talk about it very graphically. Look at the very marrow that is at the essence of the physical body. Is there any me there? Is there any mind there? Not mind, but mind, or mind, for that matter. And the answer is no, of course not. If I cut off my hand, I no longer look at that hand and think that is, I don't have the same relationship to it anymore once it's separate from my physical body, right? So that shows that there is no mind that exists in my flesh, because if it did, when I cut off my hand, there'd be two me's. The me that existed in that body part that was cut off, and the me that exists in this body part. But we realize that's not the case. And we would never even we would never fall into that deluded thinking. Yet, when we don't have that extreme of a situation, it's very easy to fall into the deluded thinking. So this is being very, very explicit. It gets even more explicit when he says, if even when searching with such effort, so you've taken the scalpel of wisdom, right? So he's saying, he's not actually, I don't think I have to say this out loud, but he's not actually advocating us to cut into our bodies and to look at the different pieces, but we use the scalpel of discrimination. So you're using your wisdom and your awareness to think about it in a meticulous way. What is this body that I'm so attached to? What is this body that I'm so attracted to? Even after you've done that, you've mentally taken apart all of the different elements of your gross corporeal form. Even after you've done that, when you have searched with such effort and you can apprehend no essence, why, with so much attachment, are you still guarding this body now? So this verse right here is pointing at the enormous gap we have between our intellectual understanding and our experiential understanding, right? It's very, very easy for any of us who have studied even a small amount to recognize that our mind and our body are separate. There's nothing inherent in this body that is me or mine. And therefore, there is some ultimate foolishness to being attached to this body, right? Very easy to. There's no core essential part of this body that makes up me, quote unquote.
Intellectual understanding.
Experiential understanding, right? So intellectually, that's very, very easy to understand, right? Like it doesn't take a Buddhist even just to recognize that. And yet, realizing that in an experiential way and not having attachment to this body is much more difficult. So you can analyze all the different parts of the body. There's no me in my fingers or my hands. There's no me in my blood or my veins. There's no me in my torso or my gut or my head or any part of me. There's no me in the marrow of these bones. There's no essential I that exists in any part of this body, and even the atoms of my blood cells. right? There's no me. Even in my DNA molecules, there's no essential me, right? Yet I know that intellectually, and yet I still do everything I can to protect this body. I still conflate this body with me all the time because my self-grasping is so strong, right? My grasping at self of persons is so strong. And so that is the gap. When you recognize intellectually, there's nothing here to grasp onto, and yet you do it anyway. Why? It's because there's a gap between our intellectual understanding and our experiential understanding. And the only way to close that gap is through meditation. That's the only way. I mean, maybe there are other ways, but that's the only way I can think of that I have been taught, right? Maybe you might have some, okay, I will say it. You might have some experience that helps close that gap, right? Like some uncommon experience might happen to you where like flip gets switched, but people have these kind of light bulb moments all the time. So those might happen, right? But you can't trust those. You can't rely on that eventually I'm going to have a light bulb moment. So the only way that we know that we can consistently develop experiential understanding is through meditation, right? And if we have some sort of insight, some insight moment, we shouldn't just let that rest on its laurels. We use that then as fodder for further meditation. So I won't say meditation is the only way to gain experiential understanding, but it is the prime and consistent way to gain experiential understanding, right? So this verse is just reminding us, when you've gone through the effort, as we can do very easily, to say there is no me in my feet, in my legs, in my calves, in my torso, in my chest. There's no me in my arms or my head. There's no me in any of my organs. There's no me in my blood or my bones or my marrow. I can use my awareness, my intellect to take apart my body and see there's no me that exists. There's no self that exists in any of those parts. And even though I understand that, I still grasp at this body. Why do I do it? What do I need to do to not do that? And one of the things that's useful to think about is what is the harm that is coming? What is the harm that I'm causing by grasping at this body? That's also very helpful to think. Like, why am I taught not to do it? Because if you don't believe that it's harmful, then why would you ever want to stop doing it, right? Which is why having conviction in the teachings is useful. So, the next verse, again, going into a little bit of our graphic nature. But what use is this body to you if it is dirty insides, are unfit for you to eat, if its blood is not fit for you to think, and if its intestines are not fit for you to, or not fit to be sucked? So it's saying that at its coarsest level, the body, your physical body, can't even provide food or sustenance to you, right? So why is it benefiting you? So therefore, at second best, this body is not going to provide me sustenance. I can't eat the filthy insides of this body. I can't be nourished by my own body. So at second best, this body could be served as sustenance for others, right? So that's the next verse. At second best, it is only fit to be guarded in order to feed the vultures and the jackals. Truly, this body of a human being should only be employed in the practice of virtue. So it's saying that your body can't sustain you on its own, right? All of the coarse parts of this body aren't going to sustain you. However, they say at least when you die, your body will become food for some sentient being. So it's worth protecting your body to keep it in good shape so that when you die, at least it'll feed someone else. If you're going to try to protect your body, that is maybe a valid reason, but it's very, very inconsequential. That's why it says at second best.
So last sentence, it says it is helping, Nagarjuna is helping us to understand that we have gross body. So we know that it's impermanent, it's of no use, it's useless, that's what he's mentioning. At the same time, he's saying here in the last sentence, knowing all these things, truly this body of the human being should only be employed in the practice of virtue.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at, yeah. So that's the
life mentioning there. Your body is only meant to practice virtue in this life.
Well, not only meant to, but that is kind of the key part of this. You jumped a little bit ahead of my explanation. So yes, you're right. No, I'm not criticizing you. Saying you're right. That these two lines here, and even you can see in my text, they're highlighted. These are the important parts, right? This whole, from verse 59 up until the first half of verse 66, is showing us that we constantly conflate our mind with our body, our self with our body. That does nothing but cause us harm. If we look at the body itself, we see there's no me, there's no I in any part of the body. The body itself has no true essence that we can identify. And the body as it exists can't even sustain us. We can't suck our own marrow, we can't drink our own blood. They're not fit to sustain us. At the best, this coarse body is good as food for other animals once we die. Right? However, the benefit of having this body lets us practice virtue. And therefore, we should not be attached to this body because it is beautiful, because it is able to do any of these physical things. We should be, any attachment we have to this body, it should be because this body allows us to practice virtue in this life. And that practice of virtue has to be more important than our attachment to the body. But that's the only benefit we have to having this physical body right now, right? Which is why when you study A Perfect Human Rebirth, and we talk about the freedoms and the endowments, some of them include, I'm free from having a body that is lame or has incomplete physical capacity, which sounds like a harsh thing to say. And it's not a judgment call. But if you are mute, that's one of the things. If you're mute, or if you don't have the complete use of your legs, those are the two things that are often commented on. It doesn't make you less than, but it makes it more difficult for you to practice Dharma. Because being able to recite mantras and recite prayers is a way to accumulate merit. So not being able to do that just makes your life more difficult. And in the same way, being able to prostrate allows you to accumulate merit. So if your physical body denies you that opportunity, it doesn't make you less than. It's not a judgment, but it just means you have an additional obstacle to engaging in virtuous practice, right? And so here it's saying that this body, it is not going to sustain me. This body is not going to bring me happiness. This body is not going to do anything that brings me joy in this life in any meaningful kind of way. What this body can do is it can give me the opportunity to practice Dharma, to engage in virtuous behavior. And therefore, that is the benefit of this human body and of being a human being, right? So when I guard my body, so this is like I was saying at the very beginning, when I ask you, why do you protect your body? And you say, oh, it's because I need it to practice virtue. Do you really believe that? And so that's what he's being like. He's giving this extreme example of like, analyze even every cell of your blood and your bone marrow. Because the truth is, that isn't our first reason for protecting our body. We're attached to our body. We have this attachment to this life. We have attachment to the world, the pleasures of this life. And we have attachment to the way that our body allows us to experience the worldly pleasures of this life. Because we're sentient, we're samsaric beings. That's the reason we have this, right? There's not a judgment call. It's not like we're bad for having it. We're samsaric beings who follow self-cherishing. So we have attachment to this body and to this life. And that is our primary reason for being so obsessed with our body. And as long as we have that attachment, then we're not using our body in the most beneficial way possible, right? So he goes on to say, so as you said, the second half of verse 66 is the important part, right? The essence. Truly, this body of a human being should only be employed. He says the word only be employed in the practice of virtue. Yet, verse 67, yet, should you instead guard it with attachment, right? If you guard it with attachment, then what will you do when it's stolen away by the unsympathetic Lord of Death and given away to the dogs and the birds? You need to guard your body in order to allow it to practice virtue. But if you're attached to this body, then when it comes time to die, all you'll do is experience greater distress, right? Because death comes for all of us, right? Sickness comes for all of us. And if you're attached to it, you protect this body, not just because you want to practice virtue, but because you have attachment to this body, then that attachment is going to transform into even greater experiences of suffering. So then the goal that we have to then adopt, and it's not easy. Again, intellectually it's easy to talk about. Doing it is difficult. I have to try to protect this body, which means staying in relatively good health, which means doing the things I need to preserve my body. Not with attachment for the body itself, but with attachment to my practice of virtue that this body facilitates. And then when due to external circumstances, I'm no longer able to use the body in the same way, I have to then make sure that there's no attachment. So if I get in a car accident, in a bus accident on the way home today, and I have both my legs amputated, I shouldn't be attached to it, right? I should say, okay, my body served me up until now, and now it's going to serve me in a different way. I'm not attached to this body itself. I'm attached to the fact that this body is giving me an opportunity to practice virtue. And that might change depending on my physical circumstances, right? It's not might change. It definitely will change depending on my physical circumstances. The only question is the timeline, right? Because definitely I'm going to get sick, I'm going to get old, and I'm going to die. And as that happens, my body will become less and less nubile. It will be less responsive to my needs. This is what it means to have a body. And it's even harder now. Excuse me, not harder. That's not the right word. But our human bodies really don't do well after age 65%. Right? Like we have, due to contemporary technology, we've extended our lifespan much further than 100 years ago, right? So you see, the body has not evolved to a state where it can really uphold itself after the age 65 in the same way. Because that's where you start seeing number of cancers increase greatly, other mental problems and Alzheimer's and all of these things. Your body just really starts to fall apart. And around 65 to 70, right? But our lifespan is now 85 to 90 because of modern technology. But our bodies have not evolved to live as long as we have helped them, which is not a bad thing. Like, I'm glad that we've extended the human lifespan. That's the perfect reason to realize we should not be attached to this body, because our bodies as human beings, as Homo sapiens, our bodies have not evolved to really live in complete health beyond the age of 65 or 70. I mean, yes, there are individuals that do, but as a whole, as a species, right? Our bodies have. And we see the number of obstacles to our bodies greatly increase as we get older. And there's a cutoff. I was just reading an article a couple of months ago that says there are two big cutoffs where you notice they did a longitudinal study that lasted like 16 years or something. Basically at age 44, and then at age, I think 67 or something, you notice a noticeable difference in the way the human body functions. And it's almost predictable to an individual. Like, no matter how well you take care of your body, at the age, it's either 43 or 44, and another one in your late 60s, where like your body just hits a wall and something changes, right? And our bodies weren't meant to last as long as they do, which is great they do, because we have the capacity to practice Dharma. Because if we're attached to our body, we're doing it wrong. So we can't protect our body out of attachment. Now, we still have to protect our body. I shouldn't just go play in traffic, right? I need to protect my body, I need to eat well, I need to exercise. But I shouldn't do it because I care about this body. I should do it because I care about my opportunity to practice Dharma, which this body affords me, which aren't the same thing. They seem like the same thing, right? They're very closely related, but they're not the same thing. One is motivated by self-grasping and self-cherishing, and one is motivated by selflessness and the wish to benefit others. And again, the external action may be the same. I may eat healthy, I may exercise, I may take care of my body. The external thing may be the same, but the mind that is motivating it is going to be different. And that is what is going to sustain us when things go wrong, is the mind that we've cultivated, right? When we die, doesn't matter how good care we've taken of our body, we're going to die, and our body will become food for the fish and the birds, as I said, or the dogs and the birds. To be honest, if we're lucky, most of us, we won't even be able to use our body in that way.
We have to work towards practicing virtue, and even we have to train our mind every day, so that when at the time of death also we exit peacefully.
Yeah, I mean, most of our Buddhist practice, to some extent, is practicing for the opportunity of death. When we die, we want our minds to be peaceful and calm, right? And because the moment of our death, all that is beneficial to us is the spiritual practice we've had in this life, right? When we die, our body is no benefit to us. Our friends, our family, they're no benefit to us. The wealth we've accumulated, the fame we've accumulated is no benefit to us. The only thing that helps us at the moment of our death is what spiritual practice we've done in this life, and whatever good karma we've accumulated throughout our practice in this life. That's the only benefit in the time of death. So a lot of our spiritual practice is preparing ourselves for the time of death, so we can die a peaceful death that propels us towards positive rebirths, that allows us to continue our spiritual journey, right? So practicing, again, remember the context of this section of the chapter is we're trying to practice the morality of gathering virtue, and we're trying to abandon one of the greatest obstacles to practicing that morality. And that obstacle is our attachment to our body. So one of the reasons, and this goes back to my example I gave earlier, the reason people don't stand up on the subway or on the metro is because they want the comfort of being able to sit down, right? So they're attached to the comfort of this body. And so they're so attached to it, they're more attached to the comfort of them sitting than they are to the virtue they'd accumulate by offering their seat to someone else and by relieving the core suffering of someone else. So if you look at that chance, you have an opportunity to prioritize your attachment to your own comfort or your attachment to helping others, which is more important to you. And obviously, for most of us, it's our attachment to our own comfort because our self-cherishing mind is what is guiding us, right? So what this is saying is, if we want to practice the virtue of the morality of gathering virtue, one of the biggest obstacles to that is our attachment to our body. And so meditating on how utterly useless our body is going to be when we die. At best, it is food for animals. Then that helps get rid of this attachment to our body. So it's critical to not be attached to our body. We protect our body, but not out of attachment, or not out of attachment to the body itself, but instead out of attachment to the opportunity to practice virtue. That's why we practice, or protect our body. So we can finish this section. Verse 68, if servants are not given clothing and so forth when they're unable to be employed, then why would you exhaust yourself looking after the flesh alone when even though caring for the body, it goes elsewhere? Now, in the context here, we say that servants, if they're not doing their job, they're not given, again, this is not how we treat servants now, but in the 8th century, this is an analogy that was useful, right? If you had household servants, but they weren't actually doing their job, then you wouldn't give them a place to stay. You wouldn't give them new clothes. You'd say, okay, go somewhere else because you're not doing your job, which is to take care of the household. So you're not going to provide these things for people that aren't doing their job, right? And regardless, if you're a Bodhisattva, you should. You understand the analogy, right? So if we treat external things that way, we recognize they're not fulfilling a job, therefore we're not going to give them the benefits of that. Why would we treat our body differently? Because our body is only going to fail us. Our body is not going to do anything besides fail us because it is going to die. So yet, why would we spend so much time concerned with the body itself, attached to the body itself, looking after the flesh alone, as he says, caring for it with attachment, when in the end, no matter how well you care for it, it is going to fail you. That is undoubtable, right? Now, having paid my body its wages, he goes on in 69, I shall engage in making my life meaningful. However, if my body is of no benefit, then I shall not give it anything. So saying that as long as I'm able to maintain my body in a meaningful way so I can use it to practice virtue, then I will do that. It's worthwhile protecting your body, and to pay my body's wages, quote unquote, as long as my body is serving my mind and is serving my ability to practice Dharma. And as long as my body is able to do that, then yes, I should take care of it. I should do everything I can to make my body last as long as possible, as long as it gives me the opportunity to practice Dharma. That's the only benefit it has. And that's the reason I preserve my body. So this verse works in conjunction. Well, the whole thing works together. But this verse and the last 2 lines of verse 66 are pointing towards the positive relationship to our body that we need. Truly, this bodied human being shall only be employed in the practice of virtue, right? That is how this body is useful. And as long as it is doing that, then I'll continue to sustain it because that is the purpose of this body, to allow me the opportunity to practice virtue. And then he summarizes, I should conceive of my body as a boat, a mere support for coming and going, and in order to benefit all others, I transform it into a wish-fulfilling body, right? So what this is saying is, I should not have attachment to this body, but I recognize it as a tool. If I want to cross the river, or if we continue our analogy, if I want to cross the ocean of samsara, I need a seaworthy vessel, right? So that means I need to take care of this boat. I can't let it be filled with holes. I can't let it, be falling apart, have a rotting wood on it. But the purpose is the boat isn't the point. Getting to the other side is the point, right? So as long as my body is able to serve as a boat, it can carry other passengers across the sea of suffering, then I should maintain it. I should sand it down. I should clean it up. I should get rid of any rotting wood, because that's the purpose of this body. It is allowing me to practice in a meaningful way. And so I don't have attachment to the body for the sake of the body. I don't have attachment to the body for the sake of all the worldly pleasure that I may receive from the body. I don't have attachment to the body because I conflate the body with being me. I have the only attachment I have is with my practice of virtue. And I recognize that this body facilitates my practice of virtue. And that's the only reason I should be attached to it, right? And so we don't have time to continue, but then the next half of this section is then, again, we're talking about the morality of gathering virtues. So the second of 3 types of morality. So Shantideva is identifying one of the largest obstacles to our practicing the morality of gathering virtue is our attachment to our own body. And so this is the way you help overcome that attachment. And then once you've overcome it, you actually can go about perfecting the practice of gathering virtue. So that's we're gonna talk about next week with the next verses in this section as we finish the second type of morality. I think maybe I'll stop there for questions. Other questions, either here or online? No? Excellent. You don't have the Bodhisattvas. I think, this teaching specifically is one of the ones that is really useful for my mind, insofar as it forces me to recognize the importance of balancing living in the world, but not being attached to the world. There's no teaching that's going to say it's good for you to ignore your body. And in fact, the Buddha himself showed by his example that ignoring his body and undergoing extreme asceticism was not beneficial, right? It didn't bring him out of suffering. We have the example of it. So we know we need to take care of our body, but we have to do it in such a way that we're not focused on the body itself, but on the function the body or the opportunity the body allows us, right? And that is true for so much of our Dharma practice, that we're living in samsara. We have to accommodate the fact that we are living in difficult circumstances. And so we need to balance what it means to be a samsaric being who has all of these emotions that I have yet to tame. I'm working on it, but I still haven't tamed them yet. I have to go out into the world and deal with people who are difficult. I have to go out into the world that feels like it is chaos all the time, right? Like right now, especially, really hard time to be alive. To be fair, I'm sure it's always hard time to be alive in samsara, but for us, I don't have my personal experience of that. I do have personal experience of the chaos we have right now. I have to balance that with the recognition that I have an opportunity to practice Dharma that is unprecedented. And I have a proclivity to practice Dharma that is unprecedented. And all of the difficulties I'm experiencing, they all are fodder for my Dharma practice. They don't have to be obstacles. None of them have to be obstacles to my practice of Dharma. In fact, they're the exact opposite. They are creating the perfect conditions for me to then stop focusing on my self-cherishing mind and instead focusing on how to benefit others. The answers aren't going to be immediate, observable. It's going to take effort, but I have to constantly balance what it means to take care of my worldly needs for the purpose of my spiritual needs. I can't neglect the world I'm in and the situation I'm in, especially for those of us who have worldly responsibilities like family, job, school, these things. I can't neglect those things. Those are my worldly responsibilities. But I only engage with them in such a way as to meet those responsibilities with my Dharma practice being prioritized, right? That doesn't mean I neglect my family, but it means that I then take my Dharma practice, my spiritual goals, my journey, as the lens through which I relate to my family, as the lens through which I take care of, my family, or I go to work, or I go to school. Whatever it is I'm doing, my Dharma practice should be the prism that then allows me to see more clearly how to be a meaningful member of a family, of society, of community. If I'm going to go to a protest, if I'm going to fight for better wages, if I'm going to try to stand up for those people that are suffering or experiencing injustice or prejudice or any of these things, I have to do that with a Dharma mind, not an emotional mind, right? So it doesn't matter what my job is. I could be a janitor who is cleaning toilets, or I could be a doctor who is a brain surgeon who is saving lives. Regardless of what my job is, I have to go about that job with the mindset that says, I am doing this to make life better for sentient beings in the immediate sense and to work for all sentient beings' freedom from suffering. It doesn't matter how simple or how complicated my job is, or how my activities are, my responsibilities. All of them, I have to view through Dharma-colored glasses, right? That's what's most important. And the Dharma can accommodate all types of existence. And what I mean by that is, sure, if you look at the teachings of the Buddha, they're not going to talk about AI or about the internet or these things, right? That doesn't mean that the teachings of the Buddha have an inability to address 21st century problems. It just means that we have to learn how to use the Dharma to be meaningful in our lives, right? I've read I've read books that say that the Dharma has to change to meet the 21st century Western mind. Especially books on like contemporary psychotherapy and Dharma. Some of them we have in our library. And those are useful if you're giving them to non-Buddhists who are interested in learning how Buddhism can help a secular psychotherapy practice. Very helpful. Sure. But if you're a Buddhist, no. Their Dharma does not have to change to meet 21st century Westerners or Western mind. I know as Indians, you're not Westerners, but you're more like Westerners than not because you have a Western mindset, right? Whatever that means. At least when we compare it to 8th century or 6th century Indian mindset. The Dharma does not have to change to meet the 21st century. The Dharma has all of the answers we need. We just have to understand how to apply it to our life, how to let the Dharma be the primary focus that then infiltrates every aspect of our life, every aspect of our relationship, every aspect of our service. But when we do that, then our lives become meaningful. And no matter what activities we're taking, whether they be worldly in appearance or not, they're Dharma activities that are leading us and all sentient beings at a suffering. Right? You know, the biggest obstacle, the reason being ordained is much easier than being a layperson is because I don't have a family to worry about, right? And we recognize often the difficulties of having a family and having these responsibilities. And yet, at the same time, those are the examples we give to how we cultivate love and compassion for others. The primary example is we should all develop love for all sentient beings. That's the same as a mother loves her only child, right? And so you look at the responsibilities of a household to their family and to their core community. Those are the type of emotional sentimentalities that we should be cultivating. We just need to cultivate them towards all sentient beings. But so by being a householder, having those worldly responsibilities can give you insight into how to practice Dharma in a meaningful way, as long as it isn't closing your walls, right? You have to use whatever your worldly experiences are in the world to then become something bigger than worldly experiences, if that makes sense, right? And so it doesn't matter what those experiences are. You have to then allow yourself to take them, use them as an example, and then go beyond them. Okay, I see one hand raised online. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Maybe
Venerable is slightly off topic, but
okay.
this was coming from, of course, we need to put a joyful effort and practice is important and all that is fine. But of course, I get slightly kind of distracted because some of my Sangha friends are into Dzogchen and Mahamudra. So this concept of transmission and empowerments, there is always this confusion that Buddha doesn't give his realizations, but he tells us the path of suchness, so we have to walk the path. But there's always a doubt in me that, when you meet a guru and he gives some transmissions and empowerments, is it his realizations which are passed on, or what is exactly that, if it's not too off the...
That is quite off topic, Sangeeta, but I will say...
Yeah, sorry. So if you want to
that's
avoid
okay.
it, it's fine, but it's always
okay.
been in my mind for some time.
So the teacher is not obviously giving it, regardless of the practice, the teacher is not giving us their realizations, right? That's impossible. If the teacher was able to give out their realizations, then we'd all have realizations. And I have met the most infinitely kind, beneficial teachers, and yet I don't have any realizations. So clearly they're not giving me their realizations. What a transmission is doing is, and this is, not something that we can, this is where we have to have some faith and some conviction that is born not out of blind faith, but out of having experienced things ourselves and listening to our teachers and experiencing their wisdom. We have to have conviction and faith that we receive in a transmission, for instance, the imprints of engaging in that practice, right? So here's an example. And again, this is like a mythological story, so take it as fact if you like or not. But so Vasubandhu was an Indian saint and scholar, and he famously recited the Vinaya Sutra every day, over and over and over again. And he was an expert at the Vinaya Sutra. And there was a pigeon that lived on his roof. And so every day the pigeon heard him reciting the Vinaya Sutra over and over and over again. And then that pigeon died and was reborn as a young boy in the village. And he went to the family and he said, you have to give me your boy. That wouldn't really go in 21st century, but he said, you have to give me your boy. He's my student. And they said, what are you talking about? And he said, look. And then he asked a question about the Vinaya Sutra, and the boy knew all the answers. Because even as an animal, just merely hearing the blessed words of the Dharma created an imprint in him that didn't do anything for him in that life, right? As a bird, it didn't do anything, but it created an imprint that in the future, when he then had access to a human body and a human mind and the human capacity to understand, it came much more quickly, right? So when we receive these transmissions from our teachers, whether they be tantric transmissions or just transmissions of the sutras, what we're doing is preparing our mind to then access them in a more meaningful and complete way in the future. And the other benefit of those transmissions specifically. So that's true for just hearing the Dharma in general. That's always true. We receive these imprints. The benefit of transmissions is a transmission or a lung is not just from our teacher, but it goes back all the way to whoever originally spoke that teaching, right? So if it's the sutras, it goes back to the actual Buddha. The whole point of transmissions is being able to trace it back. So it's not just the mere imprints that we get from our teacher, but it's the imprints that go through these whole generations of teachers, right? So I could give you a transmission, quote unquote, a transmission of this text. But if I haven't received that transmission, that's not really a transmission because it doesn't go beyond me. It only stops at me. Whereas the text that I have received transmissions from my teacher, if I were to give that transmission, you wouldn't be just receiving imprints from me and my connection to it, but from my teacher and then my teacher's teacher and that teacher's teacher's teacher and so on, all the way back to, in this case, Shantideva or whoever it was that actually spoke that text aloud. So transmissions, in that regard, are more than just the imprints that associate you and prepare you to have Dharma realizations, but they're also connecting you to a lineage of thought and practice that goes far beyond just your one single teacher and beyond a single lifetime. So that's why they're more powerful in that way, because they carry the weight of lifetimes and lifetimes of practice and meditation, right? But in the end, all they're doing is giving us imprints that we then have to do something. You can get all of the virtuous imprints in the world. If you don't actively seek out practicing virtue, they're not going to ripen into anything, right? You can plant all the best seeds in the world, but if you don't water them, you're not going to get any plants, right? So it's the same way with our imprints, that no matter, you can go to all the highest lamas, and if you hear all their words, but you don't actually try to practice what they teach, it's very minimal benefit, right? And sometimes that's the only benefit we can do, right? So for instance, when my mother was sick and she was dying, the last couple of days of her life, she was not conscious. So I had Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings playing in a loop all the time. My mother wasn't Buddhist, and when she was awake and conscious, she would not have been content to listen to some weird Nepali chanting in Tibetan. It would not have made her mind at ease. But when she was not actively conscious, I knew she'd at least get some imprints. Now, were those imprints huge? I don't know. I don't have the ability or the wisdom or the realization to understand the cause and effect, but I know they were not harmful and they were helpful to some degree, right? So that's why I know a lot of friends who will always have mantras playing, like CDs for their pets in their house, so that even when they're not home, at least their pets get the imprints from those mantras, right? And that's why Lama Zopa would name all of the animals things like Omani Padme Hum, and he'd name them these holy things. So even when you're saying their name, you're giving them some small imprint. Is that huge? I don't know, but it's definitely something, right? So we have to, at the bare minimum, those imprints are beneficial. We should try to collect as many as we can. And that means going to teachings. That means meeting with teachers. That means trying to receive initiations, receive transmissions. At the bare minimum, that's going to help us in the big picture. But more important is then taking those teachings, whatever they are, and putting them into practice right now. Transforming our mind and allowing the Dharma to actually show us how to live a meaningful life right now. That's far more important than going to 1,000 initiations. If you go to 1,000 initiations but don't ever try to do anything except collect them, like you would collect figurines and put them in your house, good for you. But if I go to one teaching and I do everything I can to make that teaching, to live those teachings right now in my life, that's so much more powerful and important, right? So I'm not saying do one at the expense of the other, but prioritize practice. Prioritize practice in this life. And when you have incredible teachers, then they can make your practice more fulfilling, and they can make it easier to practice, and they can give you those imprints that will then ripen to make your practice more well-rounded. So we can seek those out when we have the opportunity, but practice. You are responsible for your mind, right? You are responsible for your own happiness. You are responsible to free yourself from suffering. Our teachers are phenomenal. They're the heart of the path. Without them, we wouldn't have access to Dharma, but they cannot free us. We have to do the work.
Thank you, Edward.
Okay, I think we'll end there. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your questions here. Thank you for coming. Those who made it out in the sticky heat of Bangalore, thank you for joining us online. let's take a moment to recognize that our study and our practice of the sacred text today and of the Dharma in general has accumulated some merit. And so instead of wishing to keep that merit for ourselves, we generate a mind that wishes to dedicate that merit, that we wish it may ripen on other sentient beings. May whatever good karma I have accumulated ripen on other sentient beings that might be free from suffering, that might be free from distress. May it ripen on other sentient beings that might have access to the teachings of the Buddha, that might meet Mahayana spiritual friends, that all of our holy gurus may continue to display the aspect of long and healthy lives, so they continue to lead sentient beings out of suffering. I especially dedicate to Miss Ratnamala, the sister of the landlord who rents us this facility, who recently has had brain surgery and is recovering from brain surgery. So we especially dedicate for her as she requested our prayers. And we dedicate to all those sentient beings who are suffering, whether they've requested our prayers or not, that they may quickly be free from their suffering, they may meet the Mahayana teachings, and they may quickly become Buddhists. And we ourselves, may we become Buddhas quickly and more quickly so that we might be of maximum benefit to others. That is the ultimate wish for our, whatever merit we've accumulated. May it ripen in our own achievement of Buddhahood for the purpose of benefiting others. So dedicate strongly in this way, and we'll recite some very brief verses of dedication. So let's turn to page 235 of the Gold Book. And so we'll recite these 5 verses, and then we will recite a long life prayer for His Holiness, a short one. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel of Bodhisattva that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with a dedication that is praised as the best by the victorious ones thus gone of the 3 times, so I might perform good works. I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected to the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of perfect pure Lobsang Drakpa to shine forever. Now we'll jump to page 273. And we'll offer these 2 verses. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all of your holy wishes be fulfilled. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all of you coming. And I look forward to continuing our teachings next week. We'll be online next week, but I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
For you to take it back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Lekden, for offering teachings. I hope that it was useful to everyone. Please join us in offering prostrations.